Yo, what's going on, everyone? It's Brian and Jim here with Drink a Beer and Play a Game, and we're continuing with our Resident Evil reviews. So what are we looking at today?
Today we are looking at Code Veronica, but we're using the Code Veronica X version because that's the one we have.
That's an X. See, you can see in the little camera thing.
I'm very aware, Brian. I grew up with the WWF in 1997 as well.
You were never a DX fan. You were a Job Squad.
I do like me some Job Squad. I can't lie there.
Stay focused, Jim!
God damn it. Let's just get into the review.
Jim, before we review, should we mention the fact that we might not be as high on this game as others?
There's actually a lot of people out there who say this is their favorite Resident Evil. We might not be on that same wavelength, but we think we're a little fair about this. So we'll explain, as fairly as we always do, what we think about this somewhat possibly underrated or overrated entry into the series.
Well, for people who say that, I mean, you gotta have people who are wrong. You're wrong all the time.
Ah.
Let's get started.
Originally released to the Dreamcast in 2000, this was eventually ported to the PlayStation 2, the GameCube, and onto the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 online services. This is a first in a lot of ways. It's the first game to not be on a PlayStation console. It's the first game to not be set in America. And that's it. It's another Resident Evil, so let's just get into it. The graphics. Before we get into anything, I'm just going to say that we're playing the Code Veronica X version on the PlayStation 2, so just keep that in mind. When it comes to graphics, it's a pretty good looking game, and in a lot of ways it's kind of a first for good and for bad. For good, everything now is made out of 3D models, so while everything doesn't look as detailed as you would with a pre-rendered background, it all kind of flows together more. It doesn't just look like a jaggy polygonal mess on top of a matte painting. So that's good. The downside is this game is notorious for just turning down the gore. I guess they were trying to have a more widespread audience with this one because gone are the decapitations, the blood's been severely cut down, and it's just, it really loses a lot of what made Resident Evil when you take the gore out of it. It's still a good looking game though. The character models are very solid. Zombies and tyrants and hunters and everything, they've arguably never looked better up until this point. The game surprisingly doesn't have as much dynamic lighting as I would think, but where it makes up for it is you have a dynamic camera now, so not everything is a fixed camera angle. You'll have sections where it'll be zooming in and out of you, so it's a cool touch, but it can also kind of be disorienting, so it might take a while for you to get used to it if you're starting a series from scratch. Outside of that though, we do think it's a good looking game, so we gave it 8s. And when it comes to beer, I'm just going to add one very sad beer for the lack of gore. The sound again is good, but it's weirdly a mixed bag. Overall, the music composition in the game is really good. It's just, it has a typical thing with Resident Evil where you have your quiet sections to build suspense, and you'll have your action set pieces with the more thumping kind of music. And then, in the second half of the game, you get a lot of operatic music. And while it sounds really good, it almost seems out of place, if I could say that. It's just, it gets a little annoying after a while because it's like in orchestrated, but there's like singing, like the
Jim, it's just like The Fifth Element. I love that movie.
It's a good movie.
Corbin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've seen it.
Damn it.
I just know the girl with her thingies. Ah, what?
You mean Mia Jovovich, who would later star as Alice in all the Resident Evil movies? That's called a tie-in.
Oh my god, you're right.
Ah!
She was also naked in those.
Nipples.
Damn it. Anyway, moving on to the sound effects, they've been muddied a little bit. Not that the sound effects themselves are muddy, it's just, I guess again with turning down the gore and the violence, the guns don't have that same pop that they had in the other games. They sound a lot quieter, and that's just really disappointing. What's the fun in shooting a machine gun if it's just going pew 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 pew? Give me that big old give me that. Give me big explosions in games like this. And this is continuing the trend where it's going a little bit more action-oriented, so You think having big booming sound effects would be part of it, but hey, what do I know? I'm just a dick.
Small one at that.
God damn it. The voice acting, again, is fine. It's definitely on the upswing with the series at this point, so I have no complaints there. And just overall, like I said, it's got a lot of really good points, but then some just weird decisions. But I can't really fault it for just not being my taste, so we gave it 8s. And when it comes to beer,
Jim!
what now?
On top of any beer you're going to add, can I add one?
Sure.
I hate that Steve character's voice. It's so whiny and bitchy, so I want to add a beer just for that.
Alright, that's fair. So we'll add one for Bitchy Steve, we'll add one for the opera, and we'll add another one, that's right, we're going 3, for the weak sound effects.
The control I can keep quick, because you've heard me say it with all the Resident Evils, you still have to deal with tank controls. Now, if you listen to our other reviews by Resident Evil 3, they managed to perfect the tank controls by adding in 2 major mechanics, and those are the 180-degree spin and the ability to dodge. This game decided to get rid of the ability to dodge, which is a real problem for me, because you're still trying to be an action game, but now you got rid of one of the elements that made it a lot more accessible. But at least you still have the 180-degree spin, so I guess you get some points from us there. The other interesting mechanic they did include is the ability to dual wield, and when you aim at multiple enemies, if they're even a little bit separated, your arms spread out in angles that don't even make sense. But hey, because it's kind of auto assist, you're always going to hit your enemy, so it doesn't really mess up the flow that bad. All in all, this is everything you've seen from Resident Evils, but it was just disappointing for us that it took that little downgrade from the smoothness of Resident Evil 3, so we could only give this one 7s. Some people may feel it deserves a lot less, but once again, Jim and I, we grew up playing this, so it was an easy transition. When it comes to beer, I'm going to add 1 for just downgrading the control. The gameplay. Honestly, instead of focusing so much on the gameplay, because it's the same old formula, you have a lot of puzzles, you have inventory management, and you have a whole bunch of enemies with a limited amount of weapons and supplies to deal with them. So, instead of really diving into all those aspects, let's first just start with the story as you follow Claire Redfield, who's looking for her brother Chris in Paris 3 months after the raccoon incident. But she ends up getting captured by Umbrella and then is sent to this Rockford Island where she is imprisoned and breaks free. Along the way, Claire runs into that annoying-ass Steve Burnside, as well as the main antagonists, who are the Ashford twins. Now, without revealing too much, let's just say they are tied to a new strand of the T-virus, which is called the Veronica strand. Halfway through the game, you become Chris Redfield, who, ironically enough, is now searching for his sister Claire. I do like the fact that you get to play as 3 different characters, but honestly, none of them play that different from one another, so it's not as memorable as some of the previous titles. The zombies in this game are significantly faster and stronger than what I've noticed in all the previous Resident Evil to this point, and they always do this annoying-ass move where they lunge at your feet. In previous titles, you would have that with once every maybe 6 zombies. This one, it's almost every goddamn zombie, and it's really annoying. Like Jim mentioned, their heads don't come off, so you don't even get that satisfying kick. On top of that, the shotgun, which is a staple of every video game, just feels a little bit weaker. And the bowgun, I don't know what the hell they're doing this time. It does make sense that they're not shooting out 3 bows like in Resident Evil 2, but you have to light a motherfucker up before he goes down. And yeah, you got a ton of bows, but I don't know, it's just not as satisfying killing enemies in this game. And the other interesting thing with this game is there's 2 boss fights that you can completely just run away from. Resident Evil is known for a lot of things, but you're almost always stuck fighting bosses, and in this game you can completely avoid the giant spider on the ice towards the end, and that goddamn electrifying albinoid? I don't know how to say it, but either way, it's crazy to me that in a Resident Evil game, one of the most intense moments you can just simply run away from. And my final issue with this game is that the layout for this island is just a little confusing. And then eventually you go to Antarctica, and that map is a little confusing. I know you have a map, and I know it's probably because I just didn't play the hell out of this game. Just things didn't really add up for me. If I'm being completely unbiased though, I will say you still get a lot of crazy encounters with some unique bosses, and there are still plenty of great horror elements here. But for Gemini, it didn't quite hit the mark as well as the previous Resident Evil titles, so we could only give it a 7. When it comes to beer, I'm going to add 1, because I'm pretty sure this is the most long-winded I've been in a while.
Alright, when it comes to originality, there's not that much here. I mean, you get the dual wield, everything's 3D rendered instead of pre-rendered. You have a story that's not set in America. And I guess if there's one cool thing, it's the new battle mode, which you unlock after beating the main game. And basically, it's like first person, it drops you into a random area with infinite ammo, and you just kind of have to go against a random swarm of enemies. So that's kind of cool. But besides that, it's the same old tried and true formula here. Just less violent, which I guess is original for the series. Not in a good way.
Bullshit!
Yeah, I'll go with that. So we gave it 3s. And when it comes to beer, I'll just give 1 beer for not really doing that much different.
The replayability I can keep fairly short as well. It's like all the previous Resident Evils. Once you beat the game, you will unlock the new battle mode as Jim mentioned, but also if you complete certain tasks, you can unlock an unlimited rocket launcher, a first-person mode. It all kind of depends on how fast you beat the game or the setting on which you beat the game in the first place. Other than that though, you really only have the one ending, and it's not like you can choose different characters, even though you do get to play between Chris and Claire and even Steve throughout the game. You don't choose the order in which that happens. So we couldn't give this game a ton of points. So overall, we both gave it a 4. When it comes to beers, I'm not even going to add any because it's hard to match some of the replayability of those PlayStation games. So overall, as you can tell, this isn't one of our favorite games. Now what I will say is it has a lot to offer. We're not saying it's an absolutely terrible game, but it falls short from some of the earlier titles and definitely from some of the later ones. Is it one you should get? I would still suggest it, and if you're going to get a port, I would actually probably go with one of the ones on the system, or if you're lucky enough to still have a Dreamcast, because that was one of the selling points for me when I bought the Dreamcast.
Yeah.
So, I mean, overall, Jim and I, we both gave it 7s. It's above average, but it just is okay.
It's still a good game. I think it's just in a weird spot, both with the series and technology, because you have the weird dichotomy between trying to be more accessible so it's not as violent, but also trying to be more graphically enhanced, but not quite being there yet, tech-wise. So it kind of loses a lot of what gave the series the oomph. Like, even, I think it was just a little too early to go full 3D. I think it kind of lacked a lot with the detail missing from a pre-rendered background.
Would you say you never go full 3D?
I can say that.
Would you also say that even though some people think the Steve Burnside death is one of the saddest moments, I was actually kind of happy because he was annoying as shit.
I did not care about that guy one bit. At all.
So, when we combine all of our scores together, this rounds out to a 6.9, which we know is going to break some people's heart, but honestly, if you're comparing it against all the other Resident Evils and where this game should have been to what it released, makes sense to us.
Yeah, it's still a good game, don't get us wrong. It's just in that lower tier of mainline Resident Evil games.
Yeah. So, either way, guys, thanks for sticking with us through the review, and cheers.
Cheers.
When it comes to beer pairing, I chose the New Belgium Brewing Company's Voodoo Ranger IPA. Typically, I don't like to pair IPAs with survival horror games. However, since this game was so different from the previous titles, I felt that this was an appropriate pairing. The Voodoo Ranger is a well-rounded beer, and even if you're not a fan of IPAs, this can help turn you around. So grab a few bottles, enjoy this game, and remember to drink your beers and play your games responsibly. Cheers, guys. As always, guys, thanks for checking out this video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you give us a thumbs up, leave some comments, or better yet, why not subscribe? Till next time, guys, cheers.